Welcome to Athens Speakout. I'm David DeWitt, and this is prospects in the California and Democratic primary and 5 other states. My guest is Robert Whaley, a retired historian from Ohio University, and I'm David DeWitt, Associate Editor of the Athens News. This is Athens Speakout 369. Today we're going to start with a statement, I believe.
Yeah, well, I have no news that is breaking news. Last night, about 11 p.m., Nate Cohen of the New York Times announces that AP says that Hillary Clinton is the presumptive candidate, and she has the necessary 2,383 pledged delegates to win the race. Now, that is presumptive. That's not official.
Right.
Because those include 20 superdelegates that overnight declared themselves for Hillary.
And it wouldn't be official anyway until after the convention.
That's right. So I was not impressed with that news.
No, but I think it was a little irresponsible. This is like one of those journalism games where the AP it was totally about just being first.
Yeah.
They just wanted to be first.
Yeah, and the New York Times wanted to be right on board.
Right. And so that's why they did this. So even though, 6 states are voting today, Tuesday.
Right.
That's why they did this Monday night. And I don't consider it very strong journalism ethics to do that.
No. The media want to be in charge of the votes.
Yeah, I mean, are they going to start calling the general election on the Sunday before,
Yeah.
because their polls say what's going to happen?
Yeah.
I just think it's all about them just wanting to be first, and
Yeah.
I'm not very impressed by it.
No, that's very good. And I got a private letter from Bernie
Oh.
at 2:30 a.m., and he said, ignore the AP.
Oh,
There are 694 pledged delegates still in 6 states, and let's wait for the count tonight and see how we're doing.
Yeah.
So I like Bernie's reply. It's not official. Don't be scared. Watch out for the oligarchy. This is only the 1% trying to dominate the 99%.
Yeah.
He made another ploy, which I agreed with. So I would have been even stronger as a private citizen. I would have been bolder than Bernie. And I can be bolder than Bernie because I'm only a private citizen. Mm-hmm. He has to be cautious about saying something that'll alienate Obama because he could tip the balance at any moment. So anyway, I would go back to the Bernie campaign from the beginning, going back to 2015. We need to define democracy, and money should not be dominating who the voters are going to vote for, and the media should not be picking the winners. So the media are one of the establishments that Democratic voters have to face, and the Democratic National Committee and the New York Times are 2 more establishments that Bernie is running against. So I'm looking forward to tonight's count. And I'm looking forward to the Philadelphia Convention and Bernie's arrival there to see what he can get out of the Credentials Committee and the Platform Committee. He's still negotiating, hopefully.
Right, and I would like to see him play a big role in writing the party.
Yeah,
platform.
so we're on the same page. So
shall we move on? Do you want to?
let me just say a few more words about this. I'll wind up in a minute. Okay, I was going to talk something about how Kerry lost the election in 2004, and Gore lost the election in 2000 through the media, because they were campaigning then with the news. Okay, so this corruption has been in being long before the 2015 race.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just what I would like to mention, how people should not forget how 68 counties in Florida played basketball and bounced the ball until the Supreme Court could finally nominate Bush W. So that's all I'd like to just carry forward on that. So anyway, I'm in no position to be voting for Trump or a third party. They're not real options for me. But on Labor Day, assuming that Sanders is out and finally admits that he's out, I could vote for Senator Brown and Elizabeth Warren and leave the presidential ticket blank. Or I could vote for Hillary if Hillary is
What's on Labor
possibly
Day?
Well, Labor Day is the beginning of the general campaign.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they go to November.
Right. What do you mean voting for Senator Brown or Elizabeth Warren?
Well, Senator Brown is the Ohio senator, right?
Yeah.
Now, Elizabeth Brown is the senator from Massachusetts.
Elizabeth Warren. What opportunity would you have to vote for her?
Well, I can give my opinion and
Oh,
do
just-
the same
just
thing you and I.
advocate for
Yeah,
her?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
We
I see.
can publicize
Support her,
what
yeah.
she's doing. See?
Publicly, yeah.
Yeah,
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll continue to promote both
Yeah,
of that. I think
that's
they're
right.
both fine senators.
That's right.
Doing a good job.
And that's the way I used to think when I began voting and when Kennedy was election. When I got involved in reading the news, I was in Washington, D.C. doing my PhD thesis. And there were hundreds of congressional records available because everybody in the Congress and all of their assistants subscribed to the congressional record. And they used to read them and throw them in a basket. So I could read the congressional record every day. The congressional record has a lot more news than the New York Times because you get 100 senators talking about what's going on in each of their states and so forth and so on. So I was critical of Kennedy from the point of view of what other Democratic senators were saying. You know, I read about Wayne Morse, I read about Eugene McCarthy and McGovern and so forth. So I was a dove before Kennedy was a dove. That's what I'm saying. So I barely voted for Kennedy. Well, he was better than the Republicans, but I was not enthusiastic because he was still a Cold War warrior talking about anti-communism. But Kennedy proved, for me, a better liberal in 1963, in his last year, when he came out for the nuclear test ban treaty, which was negotiated by Macmillan and Khrushchev. We could see that Kennedy was really more liberal than he appeared to be in 1960. That's
Right.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because as a Protestant, remembering Pope Pius XII and their collaboration with fascism and the corruption of Patrick Kennedy and so forth and so on, I was kind of a little bit neutral toward Kennedy.
Yeah.
But he was better than Nixon, but not by much.
Yeah.
In that debate, they were both pretending about how hawkish they were.
Right.
They were both going to go to war for the Dodgin Islands. I thought they were both stupid. So that's how you get informed, by reading what the senators say.
Right.
Then you can anticipate what the next election is going to be about. So that's why I mentioned Elizabeth Warren as a lady to watch, regardless of what
absolutely.
happens to Hillary.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's all I'm
I mean,
saying.
she is one of the primary leaders ideologically of the Democratic Party
Okay,
right now.
so to finish up this statement, I would like to add that the other 5 states that we didn't have time to mention were New Jersey, North Dakota, South Dakota, New Mexico, and Montana. So we should be looking at California plus these 5 states tonight to see how they do.
Yep.
And I guess that's probably all I want to say on that. I don't know. Okay, now we can go on to another problem, another statement. I want to kind of summarize what we did about the Kentucky and Oregon races. That was one of the issues we explained 2 weeks ago. And do you want to say anything about that in review, where we left off?
Kentucky and Oregon?
Yeah. Is that all past history now, as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think that I was wrong on Kentucky.
Yeah.
Because I said that I thought that
Right.
Bernie would win, and Hillary definitely took Kentucky. Although
Yeah,
they
but
split
that's
the
closer.
delegates.
That's
They split the delegates
50-50.
50-50.
That's the reporting again.
Yeah,
The TV news could have said it's a close race
yeah.
in terms of
Whereas
delegates.
if they were talking about delegates, it was a tie.
Yeah,
you know?
that's how you interpret the news. Now, the second issue, besides the Oregon the Kentucky race, was the PBS problem. We spoke about how PBS and National Public Radio, and through Fred Wertheimer, expanded the power of TV and eventually led to the Supreme Court case called Citizens United versus FCC, and how that's part of the establishment that Bernie Sanders is fighting. We have to repeal, when I say we on the left,
Yeah.
have to repeal Citizens United
Absolutely.
through a constitutional amendment. And that's what Hillary's a little soft on still.
Unfortunately.
So that's going to be the campaign. These 3 issues. Okay. So what else did I want to say? Well, to carry on there, talking about the history of elections and how Johnson and Nixon were the 35th and 36th presidents, did not follow through with Kennedy's opening on the Atomic Test Ban Atmosphere Treaty, and became more anti-communist because of Vietnam.
Right.
And Johnson and Nixon are both responsible for keeping this debt going and keeping this anti-communist war fever going. And that's been a problem here. And the American economy has gotten weaker in face of Japan and Germany and China, because the American economy invests its surplus engineering talent into the weapons system and the military-industrial complex. So this problem of decay of democracy began a lot earlier than simply the last Bush 43 president. It goes back to Lyndon Johnson, as far as I'm concerned. And Johnson was worse than Kennedy, and Nixon was worse than Johnson. And George W. Bush was probably the worst president of the United States.
On foreign policy?
Well, domestic and foreign. What did he do?
Johnson?
No, George W. Bush.
Oh, George, yeah.
Yeah, George W. Bush.
I was tracing
I was
back
just
to Johnson.
I'm just going through these presidents.
Yeah.
Nixon was the worst president. Johnson was the worst president when I was campaigning. Then Nixon became the worst president as I was campaigning. And then when now George W. Bush did a little better,
Yeah.
and Ford did a little better, and Carter did much better. And then George W. Bush Oh, with continuing that war, that is a disaster.
Yeah, George W. Bush has definitely been the worst president in my lifetime.
Yep. And that's the problem that Hillary has. She's inherited that, and Obama has inherited that. They are wishy-washy on war.
Obama had to spend most of his first term cleaning up a lot of the mess
Well, he
that
did better
George
on the
W.
debt.
Bush
He did
made.
better on. He was a slight Keynesian, but he didn't have enough stimulus.
Yeah, he didn't
He
pass.
couldn't keep it going, see.
Yeah, and he tried. He got through the initial stimulus, but he's never been able to get through his jobs bill.
Right, right. So that leaves us here today on the problem of gradual decline of democracy with a small d in both the Republican Party and the rather conservative Hillary Party. That's what I'm saying. Bernie's whole campaign is let's revive the vote and the voters' participation, one man, one vote, one woman, one vote, and get the New Deal Democratic with certain socialist features revived again.
Yeah.
So even if he is the loser, I'm looking forward to his role in the Senate of keeping the ball rolling, and maybe Hillary will only be a one-term president. This is speculation about the future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you think? Well, yeah, I don't know. If she is a one-term president, though, that means a Republican takes over in 2020. I'm not sure how hot I am on
No, but
about
there may
that.
be a Democratic primary in 2020.
Yeah, that always usually just weakens the incumbent, though. That's what happened to, Ford with
Yeah,
Reagan,
that's
and then
true.
it
Politics
happened to
is-
Jimmy Carter
That's right.
with Ted Kennedy.
That is true. It's dangerous.
And usually that incumbent ends up goes on to lose.
Well, it depends how much
At least those two examples.
scandal appears in the Hillary race
Oh yeah, during her
during her
administration.
incumbency.
Yeah.
What will happen to the investigations? Who knows?
Yeah, I guess it's too far off to be able to tell.
All right. No predictions. And I don't
Yeah.
like predictions.
You're right.
I'm just saying that democracy's in gradual decline. And this always raises the religious question because we have Catholics, Protestants, and Jews, and what Bernie Sanders has proven is that an honest Jew is better than a crooked Christian who puts money before ideals. And my ideals are Jesus and Paul. And liberalism and socialism are outgrowths, inheritances from Christian Jewish civilization. And now we have Christian Jewish civilization on trial with the Muslims. And if Hillary gets involved in a war, the future of the United States is in some deeper trouble.
I think that Hillary could learn a great lesson from the administration of President Johnson.
From Johnson, what did he do?
Well, he ruined his own legacy by his tragic mistakes in Southeast Asia.
That's right.
The Great Society, domestically, his programs reverberate with us still today.
Right.
And they're largely, I would argue, a good thing.
He did a lot for blacks.
He did, well, just the whole, he shaped the country. The country is still shaped in his image with...
On the domestic.
on the domestic front, with Medicare, Medicaid,
That's
Head
right.
Start, the Endowment for the Arts, PBS.
Right.
You could go on and on. Community action. You could really go on and on. So many different things that he passed. The Education Opportunity Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, all these things.
Right.
But he ruined his legacy with his tragic mistake in Southeast Asia. I think Hillary could learn a lot from this.
If she watches that, if she has history.
If she can, yeah, because she's got this hawkish posture.
Right.
That I wish she didn't have, because there's such I think Bernie Sanders and his supporters have proven there's such an appetite for the progressive movement especially among young people.
That's right.
There's tremendous opportunity for her to make some real headway domestically on a lot of important issues for economic justice in America.
Right.
If she can hold off her hawkish tendencies and not get embroiled and make a similar tragic mistake to Johnson.
That's right.
In international relations.
But there are two weaknesses here. Both Sanders and Hillary majored in political science and not history. And neither one of them have much depth in history.
Yeah. But
Now,
surely they can recall the Johnson administration.
Or they can recall what the media said.
Yeah.
But if you learn, if only what you know from the media, that's a poor definition of history.
I agree.
I learned from reading a biography of Thomas Jefferson, who Thomas Jefferson really was. I read a biography of Abraham Lincoln, who Lincoln is. But the average TV goer doesn't know anything.
Yeah, they've got a caricature in mind.
They have images.
Yeah.
This is largely hot air. And you could listen to these uninformed comments. All they can do is say, that is, I'm talking about the Trump people.
Oh, sure.
All they can say is, well, I'm not voting for Sanders, he's a socialist. Okay. Well, in order for me to do the Spanish Civil War, I had to read a biography of Karl Marx. And why were there socialists in France? Why were there socialists in Germany? Why did the Weimar Republic collapse?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why did Mussolini take over? Is Trump a new second Mussolini? Let's look at the parallel there. I don't think the Trump people know anything about Mussolini.
I agree.
That's why I'm saying to the audience, read more history and turn television down.
I'm with you on that one, brother. I wish.
Now, I'm sorry to announce that House of Representatives Paul Ryan endorses Trump in order to reunite the Republican Party.
Did you see his...
So it's the same old game again.
Oh, absolutely. And he's going to do that. But did you see the speech, the most recent one, about Trump's comments on the... So there's a judge who was born in Indiana who's overseeing the Trump University thing.
Ryan didn't make that mistake.
Well, no, and what Ryan did was he came out and he said that Trump's assertion that this judge is not qualified to...
Was a mistake.
He didn't just say it was a mistake, he said it was almost the textbook definition of racism.
That's all right.
To say that this guy was unqualified. But then he twisted himself into a pretzel to go on to argue that Hillary Clinton is still worse than Donald Trump, and he still supports Donald over Hillary.
Yeah.
So he basically, within a couple sentences of each other, Paul Ryan said that his party's nominee for the presidency of the United States was out there making publicly racist comments, but he's still better than Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a trick, and really only the Republican Party can do that.
The Republican Party, since Goldwater, has been more united than the Democrats.
Typically, yeah, they fall in line well.
The Democrats are individualists.
Yeah. It's part of the big tent problem.
Well, it's a part of personality, too.
I agree with
that. George McGovern, however great he was, did not back Eugene McCarthy. He backed Robert Kennedy. Then Robert Kennedy was shot. And that gave McGovern, as a personality, to have an opportunity in molding the 72 race. And he won in 72. But he didn't see the power of the media. And the media then took this Democratic primary system and brings television sets in the next election so that television is able to blunt the opinions of the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire election by propaganda. Propaganda is, back to George Orwell, is what's necessary. And I'll remind the readers again, or the viewers again, George Orwell is a better writer than any American journalist, because the American journalist is too interested in speed and making these caucuses, where George Orwell was before television and predicted how Big Brother could manipulate the British electorate, and even worse, to the American electorate.
I was going to say, as a journalist, George Orwell had the luxury of not having to compete with television.
He had time. But this idea of hate week, he got that from the American system. Mm-hmm. Because America used to have Bible week, chicken week.
Oh,
there was always another week to get the money, you know. This is National Real Estate Week. Donald Trump is making money. So he just said, okay, let's have a hate week. There's Big Brother. So he borrowed from Franco, he borrowed from Hitler, he borrowed from the American media, and he borrowed from... But ultimately, he said the British House of Commons is more democratic than the American system. That's the thing what I learned from George Orwell. Because George Orwell read English literature.
I think, in a way, I think that's true.
Yeah, right.
I agree
they have better
with him.
philosophy.
Yeah.
The American weakness in the educational system is they have few philosophers. They have few historians. Mm-hmm. And the historians and the philosophers are even having less influence. So if I had an opportunity to live a second life, I would write another book called Speed Kills. Speed Kills.
Yeah.
The internet is dumbing television down. Television dumbed radio down. Radio dumbed the newspaper down.
Right.
And the newspaper dumbed books down.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I agree with all of that.
So that's what I'm trying to say here. Okay. So I think it is necessary at this point to define conservatism. What do the Republicans mean by conservatives? Well, there's Ryan's definition. Apparently, it's loyalty to the Roman Catholic religion. Maybe not. The second definition is Senator McConnell, loyalty to the Southern Baptist conservatives. Third is Donald Trump, loyal to the Presbyterians, loyal to Calvinism. But they're all weak Calvinists, weak Baptists, and weak Catholics, because the bottom line is the money.
Right. They really didn't...
they don't talk about taxes.
They didn't take Jesus's
none of them took
anti-poverty teachings.
No, they're not really good Christians. They're nominal Christians. That's my big problem with them. Okay, so we have three versions of Christianity, and now we have Hillary. Well, she calls herself a liberal Methodist. But is the liberal Methodist, if war and money are still more important? Because Bill Clinton still got involved in the Yugoslav Civil War, and Hillary inherits that baggage. Mm-hmm. And then she drifted into Libya,
right,
along with Obama, and I don't know who's in charge, the Secretary of State or Obama. Or the military-industrial complex. That's the problem with who defines conservative and who defines liberal. The liberalism of Hillary is a lot weaker than Franklin Roosevelt or Jimmy Carter. That's what I'm suggesting.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. So then we have a fifth definition of conservatism, defined by the Wall Street Journal. Conserve capital, lower wages, save my income. So take your pick. Okay. That's what we can come back now briefly to Orwell again. Do we have time?
David, can
Oh,
We need to. This
All
is
right.
a midterm break.
We'll take a station break then.
Okay.
We are here on Athens Speakout. We're talking about the definitions of liberal and conservative and the primary race for president in the Democratic Party. And right now we're going over the various definitions from Paul Ryan conservatism to Donald Trump conservatism and everything in between. We were just going over the Wall Street Journal
Well, I
conservatism.
really didn't say anything about Donald Trump.
You said Presbyterian conservative.
Yeah, he is a nominal Presbyterian.
Nominal, right.
Yeah, but I don't know how deep that goes.
I don't know either. I can't tell
he's
for
a
the life of me if he has any conviction.
Well, he does have conviction because his real estate firm, and he has 5 children who are all Calvinists. They all hold the line, get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, no alcohol. He's against alcohol. That's one plank he has. And they all do hard work, and he does hard work every day selling real estate. The only problem I have is the administration. Selling real estate is not good experience for running the State Department.
No.
And after he gets through the nomination, and he is nominated, who is he going to appoint to the key offices of Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense?
Treasury.
That's the ball game.
Yeah.
The ball game. Because he says he's going to take care of China. Well, how do you take care of China? He's going to take care of Mexico by building a wall. He's going to make Mexico pay. Yeah, how?
He's always short on the explanations.
Yeah. So he is a nominal Presbyterian. He's a nominal Calvinist. But he's not a very good, deep Christian thinker of taking care of the poor, the underprivileged, Social Security, the Mexican population, the black population. And I think every Jew in the United States is suspicious of Donald Trump. They think he looks like Mussolini. And I don't think that Bernie Sanders will endorse Trump.
No.
They're talking about a different...
No, Bernie Sanders has said that he'll do everything he can to defeat Trump.
Okay, so to get back to Animal Farm then, just in case of review, Orwell was a better journalist because he went to Eton and he read books from Oxford and Cambridge, and Animal Farm, 1984, are better history, although it was a historical satire. He understood the historical process in that Animal Farm book, and 1984 is a very good political scientist in which he sees Big Brother as a future problem. Now, we don't really have a Big Brother. What we have in the United States are 15 cousins who would like to be Big Brother. They all want to be a propaganda minister, but nobody really wants to be the president. in the Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln sense. In taking care of the whole society, except that's what Sanders has. I'm for democracy for all of the people, not the top 1%. That's his greatest slogan. And the second greatest slogan is, my first priority is to roll back Citizens United and the corporate power that is behind the scenes of a lot of foolish people who think they are good Democrats. And of course, Thomas Jefferson predicted this when he was president. He said, if you don't have a good educational system, democracy will eventually decline.
Yeah.
And Benjamin Franklin gave warning. He said, gentlemen, you have a republic, if you can keep it.
Keep it. I'll throw in a little James Madison for good measure.
Good.
A people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power that knowledge gives.
Good, great.
And he wrote that in defense,
Right.
in support of Kentucky's public education system.
Right. So to get back to Orwell, Orwell understood Adam Smith and Karl Marx and John Maynard Keynes, and understood that the liberal press, the conservative press, the socialist press were all lying. He's the great exposer of propaganda. And the word propaganda is taboo in the United States. They talk about political correctness. They talk about advertising, but very seldom.
Propaganda.
Propaganda is
in class.
diluted to just lies. Well,
Right.
it's a little bit more subtle than lies. The original propagandist was the Pope, who set up the Society for the Propagation of the Faith. Well, when the Pope did that, the Protestants came along with,
Which pope was that? Do you know?
I think it was the fifth,
Or at least the time period?
no, it was about 1740.
Okay.
And I think his name was Leo. It wasn't a Pius. I think it was either Leo or, anyway, I can look that up, about
That's all right.
1745.
Yeah.
And that's when the deists were coming out. And
Oh, yeah,
that's
that
when
makes sense.
That's when, not the deists, the deists were coming out, but the real thing was the Masons. Masons were
Freemasons.
declared a heresy because the Masons had a secret oath. We're not gonna cooperate with the Catholics, but you can't say that publicly.
Right.
So you see, George Washington was a Mason, but he didn't deny Catholics the right to vote. Okay. I think Truman was the last Mason. You got to be appointed. It's a secret club.
Yeah.
You got to be a
have
33rd
invited
degree
and-
Mason.
Yeah.
Well, then after Truman recognized Israel, the Israelis kind of said to Truman, watch out for joining the Masons. Because I met a Jew in the, when I was teaching in a historical seminar, and I said that General Franco was anti-Masonic, and of course the French Revolution were pro-Masonic, and the Masons and Goebbels were anti-Masonic. Well, he kind of jumped to the conclusion that the Jews are anti-Masonic. Well, I think it's more complicated than that. That's what I'm suggesting.
I see.
The Jews were favorable to French Masonicism during the French Revolution because the French immediately liberated and emancipated Jews.
Well, that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Franco was anti-Masonic because it was Protestant America who in 1898 eliminated the ended the Spanish Empire in the Philippine Islands and Guam and so forth and so on. So there's a very tricky relationship there between Protestants, Catholics, and Jews, and Masonry, and secret organizations, and so forth and so on. Now, there was an anti-Masonic group in the United States, an anti-Masonic party.
I remember that.
It was a Protestant party, but they didn't like the idea of secrecy. They said in order to be a Democrat, you have to have open covenants openly arrived at. And that's what Woodrow Wilson used to advocate. Open covenants, that is an idealistic interpretation of democracy.
Yeah. It is idealistic. It's not very rooted in practical reality.
Not when you look at the balance of power.
Yeah, or just generally throughout history, the way that power works.
Yeah. Jimmy Carter was like Woodrow Wilson, open covenants openly arrived at.
Yeah.
And he got into trouble because he couldn't speak to Brezhnev and Beijing in open covenants.
Of course.
When Kissinger did it, he spoke to Moscow secretly, and then he went around 2 months later and spoke to Beijing and lied to one another. And you didn't get it until the end that Kissinger was trying to split the two communist powers.
Of course.
And get them rivals in the UN. You got to split the opposition.
And you can't do that with open covenants.
You can't do that with open covenants.
Openly arrived at.
I think we ought to talk about the final California race here, the projections.
Oh boy, today's big action.
Yeah.
This is the
I think we'll have to leave the theory behind for a while.
grand finale.
And jump up ahead. Any further questions on economics, diplomacy up to 1945 before we...
I think we can charge on ahead into California.
Okay. Well, we've kind of introduced this with this background on the first Jewish candidate who's running openly for democracy, which is a challenge to the secrecy of things. So we're at the conclusion now. Before this AP dispatch, the total delegate number on June 6th was Hillary 2,357 delegates. Sanders only had 1,568 delegates. And then on the superdelegates, Clinton had another 546 superdelegates, and Sanders only had 46. And at that point, there were still 283 delegates needed in Philadelphia. So Hillary was already up to 5783. She only needed 30 more delegates. And she's supposed to get those today at in New Jersey.
Right.
But she wanted to make the big announcement. But then that still leaves it open to what's going to happen with negotiating with Bernie at the Philadelphia Convention. Well, to bring this up to date, Trump has 239 delegates. He's over the top. He only needed 1,239. He only needed 1,237. So Indiana put him in charge of winning. And now the Republicans are consolidating behind him, and they don't want to hear much of a debate at Cleveland, although there are still 4 or 5 different Republicans who are not going to endorse him.
No.
So there's some debate in the Republican Party, which
And
is...
yeah, there's been some interesting articles this week about how a lot of down ballot Republicans are actively running away from him.
Right.
And how unusual it is for people to run away from the top of the ticket. But in a lot of places, they have to do this because they're just too vulnerable.
Right.
And even their Republican base is anti-Trump. You know, didn't vote for Trump in the primaries.
That's
and
right.
whatnot, and so they have to take that into account and try to separate themselves as much as they can.
Right.
From his message, which I'm sure he's making that a little bit easier on them this week with his comments about the judge in the Trump University case.
Yeah, well, I'll leave that to the Republicans. And getting back to the California projection for the Democrats, as of June 2nd, Hillary is in the lead with 49% of the vote, and Sanders close with 47% of the vote. We'll see what happens tonight. Anyway.
Do you think that Sanders will stay in the race?
Oh, he's going to stay in the race to D.C., for sure. District
To
of
Philadelphia? Do you mean? Or
Well, Obama may pull the plug and say, you got to confess today.
because that's what Hillary dropped out after the June primaries
what
were
she's
over in
saying,
2008. So I'm curious whether I think
That's up to Sanders to say tonight.
it really is. Yeah.
He may say, no, I'll see you in Philadelphia.
Do you have a prediction?
I don't have any
Do
prediction.
you have a desire for
Oh, I
him
have a
to-
desire.
Do you
I
think
hope-
he should stay in?
I think he should go to Philadelphia and get as much as he can on the Credentials Committee and the Platform Committee, because he needs these young voters for his own senatorial candidacy in Vermont.
Sure.
And he's got to collaborate.
And frankly, the Democratic Party needs these
They-
young voters
that's right.
for the presidential race
Right.
and for all these battleground Senate races, such as in Ohio with Strickland versus Portman.
Right. Now, what Bernie says is that he has made 32 appearances in California. He's worked very hard in the last week. And Hillary still got the media behind her. She's going to the Pelosi and the Governor Jerry Brown, and getting the endorsement from the old elite. Well, that debate is still on. Is it the same old thing, or are we going to move toward a more democratic system in the Hillary administration? That's what Sanders can still work on, is to keep the pressure going.
Yeah, and I hope he does. I think he should. I think, well, and I'd like to see the pressure continue to be exerted to change the nominating system and move away from the superdelegate process that I think has a lot of people frustrated and turned off.
Now let's talk about the prospects of war. John Kerry.
It's a heady subject.
Well, John Kerry is negotiating with Russia and with Syria, and it's a vacillating negotiation. One week he says there's a ceasefire. The next week is they're still bombing. The ceasefire is over. So I think Kerry and Obama both are just hoping to get through.
Just muddle along until next January.
Until the convention is over, without a big flare-up. Because if there's a big terrorist attack in one of those Muslim states, then is Obama going to be tempted to escalate? And will Hillary escalate? And will they tempt each other? And who's pushing it? Those are the mysteries. I have no prediction. Anything can happen in the Middle East.
Yeah. I'm more worried about what a domestic terrorist attack would do.
Well, the problem
To
with
the
the
election.
domestic is, do not call crime in Ohio or New Jersey a terrorist. The word terrorist has to be defined.
And we seem to always circle back to the same thing. How do you define terrorism?
A terrorist is an act of, it is a conspiracy. There has to be more than one. A terrorist is a group of religiously or politically motivated people who assassinate a government official. Now, the Yugoslavs were famous at terrorism back before the First World War. And a terrorist incident set off the fuse that led to World War I.
Gavrilo
Right,
Princip.
right. So the United States should define in law. We're not going to call every murder that happens in the United States a terrorist act. What is the evidence? Now, what happened at San Bernardino? Can you have free, open immigration of Muslims to the United States? Or does the FBI have to do a double check on visas? So we can have freedom of religion in the United States, but this Muslim who comes to the United States should apply for citizenship. That takes 5 years, and prove to the American Christians and Jews that he's worthy of election, and just not give a Muslim a blank check. So the immigration law is going to be a tremendous debate. I don't think that the Sanders-McCain law is ready for ratification. There's a lot of truth in what Obama is saying. Can't have free immigration. All who want to come to the United States cannot come. There must be a ceiling on Chinese, Muslims, or something. But it has to be objective ceiling.
Well, I think, yeah, we've got to have standards and safeguards in place, and we do have standards and safeguards in place.
Not enforced very well.
But that's what I was just about to get to, is that what we should be doing is reviewing our standards and protocols,
right,
and making sure that everything is in place that needs
right
to be in place to protect people from
right
those who would do us harm.
Right. Okay. So, from my point of view, a good Christian is defined by the Ten Commandments, the Sermon on the Mount, the Golden Rule, and how well can Hillary live up to that interpretation of liberal Methodism? How liberal is she? That's the question for me.
That's my big question as well. I would like to see... there's that story about the aide who was talking to Johnson in 1964 when he wanted to push through the civil rights bill.
Right.
And the aide said that he shouldn't waste his time on a lost cause.
Right.
And Johnson's response is, well, what the heck is the presidency for? And I really hope that, I assume that Hillary is going to be able to vanquish Trump. I don't know that. But I really hope that Hillary Clinton takes that approach to the presidency of, so I may have had to make a lot of compromises to get to this position. But now that I'm in this position, what is the presidency for?
Right.
And I think that's the time where, as a politician, when you reach the top of the mountain,
George Washington was.
It's time to be the idealist that you should be.
The president has to enforce the laws of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Johnson and Nixon did not enforce the laws of Congress. They intervened in an imperialistic war without a congressional vote and bypassed the Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And the Congress, for the most part, were lazy and didn't challenge the president. And that was the role of the Doves between 1964 with Wayne Morse, McGovern, Fulbright. They were senators who took their duties to heart.
And since then,
the Senate has been in decline.
I would say that the presidency, there's even more power and autonomy in foreign policy now than there ever has been in the presidency. But my point is that if Hillary Clinton is elected president, she'll have an opportunity to push the progressive ball forward, and I hope that she takes it and does it and doesn't make compromises that she shouldn't.
One more comment about the California race. I learned that there was a great journalist there by the name of Doyle McManus for the Los Angeles Times. And he gave a very balanced report, 50-50 between Hillary and Bernie on their assets and liabilities. And you could not tell whether McManus was going to vote for Hillary or Bernie, but he gave both of them their due, in my opinion. So I'm going to be looking forward to Doyle McManus's report. Well, I guess we can go on to New Jersey unless you have one more comment about
No, we can just wrap up the projections here. We've probably got about 2 minutes left.
Okay, New Jersey, tight race. CBS calls it for Clinton. And that's what she's hoping for at 7 o'clock. And that's probably in the bed. Montana might be an open seat because Montana's has a good Senate seat. So that's a little bit chancy, but that's supposed to be for Hillary.
Tighter as well.
Tight. And it seems that New Mexico may be the closest race the closest opportunity for Bernie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the governor there was smashed by Trump, and this the Hispanics are kind of up in arms, and there may be a big turnout there. Anyway, the Democratic caucus at Puerto Rico, Hillary got 59.3% of the vote, 42 delegates. Sanders got 37%, 24 delegates. So again, Hillary is ahead with Hispanics and blacks. So I guess that's all I have time to say.
All right. Well, to summarize then, what we've been talking about today is we went over what happened in Kentucky and Oregon, which were taking place the last time we met. We talked about George Orwell and the role of television and the downfall that it's created in some ways to information and how people process information. We went over definitions of conservatism and liberalisms. We touched a lot on history, as we always do, Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon years, and the role of religion in this election and previous elections. And we've gone over what is going to happen today when a lot of millions of our fellow Americans go to vote, most significantly in California.
And
this has been Athens Speakout.
Glad you came there, and we have to have debate, and debate is the oxygen of democracy. And I invite you here next week to wrap up this debatable election.
I'll see you then. Thank you, Professor.
Okay.